An animal test is when any scientific experimentation is given in which an animal is forced to undergo something that is likely to cause them pain, suffering, or lasting harm. Animal testing has been around for many years, being able to be traced back all the way to scientists in the BC era, such as Aristotle and Aristaeus, who performed experimentation on animals. Although the first major reference to animal testing occurred in the late 19th century, when a French biologist of the time, Louis Pasteur, administered anthrax to sheep. Anthrax is a serious bacterial infection that affects mainly cattle and sheep, and which in turn harms their skin and lungs. And he did so to show the importance of vaccines in his germ theory. Nowadays, most animals of interest in the US tend to be rats, mice, fish, amphibians, and birds, seeing as they are not classified as animals under animal testing regulation. An animal can be killed or kept alive with the intention of being used in laboratories for biology lessons, medical training, curiosity-driven experimentation, and chemical, drug, food, and cosmetic testing.
Robledo, and in this part, I'll be talking about the Silver Spring Monkey experiment. In 1981, Ingrid Newkirk and her colleague Alex decided to try to get full access to a randomly selected laboratory in Silver Spring, Maryland. The laboratory that they selected was called the Institute for Behavioral Research. Once in, they found 17 monkeys that were under horrible conditions. Some of them had infected wounds, missing fingers, disabled arms and limbs. They were living under horrible conditions. They were stuffed in wire cages and weren't fed, weren't looked by any veterinarian. The researchers made homemade torture devices to hold the monkeys in place while they run their experiments. Once Ingrid and her colleague learned about the way they were treating these animals, they decided to gather as much evidence as they can and took the institute into court. They made it to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court ruled in favor for Ingrid, and they were able to help these monkeys that were at the institute. The reason why this experiment is so influential is because this is the first animal cruelty case in the United States that was ruled for in favor of the animals. And this case is also the case that helped start the program PETA.
Animal experimentation or animal testing is very cruel, dangerous, and unreliable to animals. According to Dr. Richard Klausner, former director of National Cancer Institute, we have found cure in mice for over decades and simply couldn't find it in humans. 100 million animals are used in the United States a year. Rats, mice, rabbits, guinea pigs, birds, fish, and hamsters. Sadly, animals are held in restraints. Another major factor is money. Instead of being random, mice are high irritancy, dermal penetration, reproductive and developmental toxicity, and mutagenicity. These tests are expensive. Many people think that these tests last days or weeks. Some of these tests last up to 5 years. These animals that are being used as test subjects have to be bathed, clothed, and fed. For example, if an animal gets an organ taken out, or an eye, or a tooth, or a tongue, they'll be euthanized after the experiment. In conclusion, animal experimentation is bad for animals and it doesn't benefit humans. Like I said before, some of the tests that are passed on mice or other animals are not passed on humans. Thank you.
Michael Gomez, and I'm going to be discussing some of the more controversial aspects of animal testing here in the United States. So, in the United States, we have the American Welfare Act, and this is going to be the only federal law that regulates any treatment of animals in research, exhibition, transport of them, and if they're sold by dealers. And this act defines an animal as any live or dead cat, dog, non-human primate, any rabbits, guinea pigs, hamsters, and any warm-blooded animals like that. So it still leaves out birds, mice, and rats that are used in most commonly used in labs. I'm sorry, and leaves out cold-blooded animals as well as and farm animals used in agricultural research and such. So about 85 to 95% of animals that are being tested on in labs are not covered by any sort of ruling or laws or regulations. So they basically can have whatever the scientist needs to do to them done without any consequences or anything. These animals are just being experimented on while they're alive. In fact, some animals can be, if they're killed humanely before testing, then that's not covered by the AWA. That's an exemption. And in fact, in 2015, a New York Times writer did a kind of expose on the mistreatment of animals at the United States Meat Animal Research Center, and he wrote about how there were no veterinarians on the staff, and surgical procedures were being done with no vet licenses or no certificates or anything. But all of this was exempt. The AWA did not cover it, so there was really nothing that could be done. So that's just how many of animals are being treated and experimented on, and there's nothing that can be done to prevent it as of right now. No laws in place that prevent this.
Hi, I'm Reed, and I'm going to be talking about some laws and regulations regarding animal testing. So regulations and laws control the marketing of many commercial products, which include drugs, cosmetics, pesticides, and food additives, which could be harmful to human health and the environment. A number of these commercial products are tested on animals. So in the United States, animal testing is largely regulated by the AWA, the Animal Welfare Act of 1966. The federal law sets high standards of care for lab animals with regards to their housing, feeding, cleanliness, ventilation, and medical needs. However, a vast majority of animals used in research are excluded from the protections provided by the AWA. The Public Health Service, or PHS, oversees the two federal agencies doing the most testing on animals: the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. The United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA, is the federal agency responsible for overseeing and inspecting laboratories that experiment on animals, as well as those who breed and sell animals to be used in laboratories. Controversies and debate surround animal testing, especially regarding commercial products. Advocates of animal testing argue that there are no alternative ways to test these products, and animal advocates argue that scientific test results cannot truly be accurate or reliable when originating from an animal that has been mistreated, neglected, or abused.